Before Zeus hurled his first thunderbolt, before Poseidon splashed into the sea with his trident, before Hades got moody in the underworld, there were titans, big ones, loud ones, confused ones, and they ruled the cosmos like toddlers with cosmic legios. But don't worry, we're not rushing through this. This is the slow, sleepy unraveling of the most ancient family drama in existence. So fluff your pillow, sip your chamomile, and prepare to be gently bored into blissful slumber by the tale of beings so powerful they couldn't even agree on who gets the sky. The Titans were not gods. They were proto-gods, pre-gods, the beta version of divine beings. Imagine a boardroom full of celestial interns trying to figure out how to run a universe. No HR department, no rules, just raw cosmic energy and a lot of sibling rivalry. They were born from Gaia, Earth, and Uranus sky, who had a relationship best described as complicated. Gaia was nurturing. Uranus was distant. Literally, he floated above her and refused to come down. Together, they had 12 Titan children, and like any mythological family, things got weird fast. Meet the Titan squad, Oceanus, the original water guy. No seashells, just vibes. Hyperion thought he invented light, probably wore sunglasses indoors. Iapetus, father of Prometheus, big on consequences, short on foresight. Kus, the Titan of intellect, spoke only in riddles. Nobody asked him to. Kronos, the least famous Titan, even his Wikipedia page is confused. Kronos, the ambitious one, had a scythe and mommy issues. They, Rhea, Mnemosyne, Phoebe, Tethys, and Themis, the sisters, smart, powerful, and constantly rolling their eyes at their brothers. So what did the Titans do? They ruled. They lounged. They occasionally invented things like time, memory, and ocean currents. But mostly, they argued about who gets the sky, who gets the sea, and who gets to eat their children. Spoiler, Kronos wins that one. This was the Titan Age, a golden era of cosmic confusion, where the universe was still figuring out how to universe. Why does this matter? Because everything that came after, the gods, the myths, the lightning bolts, the drama, started here. With these oversized, overpowered, overly emotional beings who couldn't stop bickering long enough to realize their kids were going to overthrow them. So if you've ever wondered how the gods got their jobs, or why Kronos kept swallowing babies like they were grapes, or how Zeus ended up in a cave with goat milk and thunder issues, you're in the right place. And we're going to explain it all, slowly, sleepily, with just enough humor to keep your eyelids drooping. Like and subscribe if you're enjoying this mythological snooze fest. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from: Olympus, Tartarus, or just your cozy bed. In the beginning, there was only chaos, not noise or disorder, but a vast, silent emptiness. It was the kind of nothingness that stretched forever, without shape, sound, or purpose. From this stillness, Gaia emerged, the earth solid and nurturing, the first being to give form to the formless. She was the foundation, the bedrock of everything that would come after. Gaia, though powerful, was alone. So she brought forth Uranus, the sky, to arch above her. He was vast and brilliant, but distant, a partner who hovered rather than embraced. Still, together they formed the first cosmic pair, Earth below, sky above, and between them, the space where life would begin. Their union was fruitful. Gaia and Uranus had many children, the 12 Titans, each mighty and strange, the Cyclopes, one-eyed and loud, and the 100-handed ones, enormous and chaotic. But Uranus, disturbed by the wildness of some of his offspring, forced them back into Gaia's womb, burying them deep within her. Gaia, in pain and anger, began to plot. She crafted a great sickle and turned to her children for help. Only Kronos, the youngest Titan, stepped forward. And so, beneath the silent stars of a still young universe, the seeds of rebellion were sown, a quiet promise that the age of Uranus would not last forever. From the union of Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky, came the first generation of divine beings, the Titans. They were not gods as we know them today, but colossal, primordial forces, each embodying a fundamental aspect of the world, born from the womb of Gaia and the vastness of Uranus. The Titans were powerful, proud, and often perplexed by their own existence. There were 12 in total, 6 male and 6 female, and together they formed the backbone of the ancient cosmos. The male Titans were Oceanus, Hyperion, Zeus, Cryos, Iapetus, and Kronos. Oceanus was the embodiment of the great river that encircled the world, flowing endlessly with quiet authority. Hyperion represented light and the celestial bodies, the sun, the moon, and the stars, though he often acted like he'd invented brightness itself. Zeus was the Titan of intellect and inquiry, always pondering things no one else understood. Cryos, the least known, was associated with constellations and direction, though his role was often overshadowed. Iapetus, stern and serious, would one day father Prometheus, the clever firebringer. And then there was Kronos, the youngest, the sharpest, and the most ambitious of them all. The female Titans were equally formidable. They, Rhea, Mnemosyne, Phoebe, Tethys, and Themis. They was radiant, linked to sight, and the shining treasures of the earth. Rhea, warm and maternal, would become the mother of the Olympian gods. Mnemosyne, the keeper of memory, held the stories of the world before they were ever told. Phoebe, wise and mysterious, was tied to prophecy and the moon. Tethys governed the nourishing flow of fresh water, and Themis embodied divine law and order, always calm, always just. Together, these 12 Titans ruled the universe in its earliest age. They built no temples, waged no wars, and held no councils. Their reign was quiet, vast, and golden, a time when the world was still young and the stars had barely begun to blink. But beneath this calm surface, tensions stirred. Uranus, still distant and controlling, refused to let go of power. Gaia, still aching from the children he had buried within her, whispered of change, and Kronos, sharped and restless, began to listen. The Titans were born into a world of silence and starlight, but they would not remain passive forever. Their creation marked the beginning of a new era, one that would soon be shaken by rebellion, ambition, and the first great war of the cosmos. Deep within the earth, Gaia groaned under the weight of her imprisoned children, the 100-handed ones and the Cyclopes, buried alive by Uranus, stirred restlessly in her depths. The Titans, her other children, roamed the surface, powerful but uncertain. Among them was Kronos, the youngest, sharpest, and most ambitious of the 12. He watched the sky with quiet resentment, sensing the imbalance between Earth and Uranus, between mother and father, between creation and control. Gaia, weary and wounded, whispered to Kronos. She told him of Uranus's cruelty, of the pain she bore, of the children trapped within her. She offered him a weapon, a great sickle forged from flint, sharp enough to cut the sky itself. Kronos took it without hesitation. He was not the strongest Titan, but he was the boldest. He did not fear the sky, he feared stagnation. One night, as Uranus descended to lie with Gaia, Kronos waited in the shadows. With swift, brutal precision, he struck. The sickle sliced through the heavens, severing Uranus from his throne. From the blood of the sky, new beings were born, the Furies, the giants, and the nymphs of the ash trees. Uranus fled, broken and silent, never to rule again. Kronos had done what none dared. He had overthrown his father. The Titans rejoiced, and Kronos claimed the throne of the cosmos. He released his buried siblings, though he kept the 100-handed ones and Cyclopeas at a distance, wary of their power. He married his sister Rhea, and together they began a new age, the Golden Age of the Titans. But Gaia, wise and ancient, knew that cycles repeat. She had seen Uranus fall, and she foresaw Kronos's fate. For even as Kronos ruled with pride, a prophecy lingered in the air. One day he too would be overthrown by his own child. And so the seeds of fear were planted in the heart of the new king. With Uranus cast down and the sky no longer looming in silent tyranny, Kronos rose to power. He had done what no one else dared. He had challenged the heavens and won. The Titans, freed from their father's shadow, crowned Kronos as their king. And so began the Golden Age, a time of peace, prosperity, and quiet cosmic order. Kronos ruled with confidence, wielding the sickle that had once severed the sky. He married his sister Rhea, a gentle and wise Titaness, and together they presided over a world that was still young but growing. The rivers flowed freely, the stars blinked softly, and the earth hummed with life. The Titans each took their place in the great design. Oceanus encircled the world with his endless waters. Hyperion guided the sun and moon. Mnemosyne preserved memory, and Themis upheld justice. It was a time when everything seemed to fit, when the universe breathed in rhythm with its rulers. Mortals had not yet appeared, and the gods were still unborn. The Titans were the architects of existence, shaping the world with their immense power and ancient wisdom. They built no temples, for none worshipped them. They waged no wars, for none opposed them. Their reign was quiet, vast, and golden, a lull in the storm of cosmic history. But beneath the surface of this peace, Kronos was uneasy. Gaia's prophecy lingered in his mind. Just as he had overthrown his father, so too would one of his own children rise against him. The thought gnawed at him, turning his triumph into paranoia. And so, when Rhea bore him a child, Kronos did something unthinkable. He swallowed the newborn whole. One by one, he devoured his children. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Each time, Rhea wept, and Kronos grew more fearful. He believed he was preserving his rule, but in truth, he was planting the seeds of his downfall. The Golden Age, though radiant, was shadowed by dread. The Titans ruled, yes, but the future stirred in secret, waiting to rise. Though Kronos ruled the cosmos with strength and certainty, a shadow followed him. It was not a creature or a rival, but a whisper, a prophecy spoken by Gaia, the earth herself. She had seen the rise and fall of Uranus, and she knew that no ruler, no matter how mighty, could escape the turning wheel of fate. The prophecy was simple, chilling, and impossible to ignore. One day, Kronos would be overthrown by his own child. This warning echoed in Kronos' mind like a distant drumbeat. He had tasted power, and he feared its loss more than anything. He remembered how he had taken the sickle and struck down his father. He knew how quickly a son could become a threat. And so, when Rhea bore him children, Kronos did not celebrate. He did not cradle them or name them with joy. Instead, he swallowed them whole. One by one, the children vanished into his belly. Hestia, goddess of the hearth; Demeter, goddess of the harvest; Hera, queen of the heavens; Hades, lord of the underworld; and Poseidon, master of the seas. Rhea pleaded with him, begged him to stop, but Kronos was deaf to her sorrow. He believed he was protecting his throne, preserving the golden age, but in truth, he was feeding the prophecy, not escaping it. Rhea, heartbroken and desperate, turned to Gaia for help. The earth, ever wise, offered a plan, a secret birth, a hidden child, a chance to break the cycle. The prophecy had not said which child would rise. And so, in the quiet corners of the world, a new hope began to stir. Kronos, meanwhile, sat upon his throne, bloated with fear and pride, unaware that the very fate he tried to swallow was already slipping through his fingers. Rhea, queen of the Titans and wife of Kronos, had watched in sorrow as each of her children was swallowed whole. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, all gone, consumed by their father's fear. Kronos believed he was protecting his throne, but Rhea saw only cruelty. Her heart ached with grief, and her womb trembled with the weight of another child growing inside her. She could not bear to lose another. Desperate, Rhea turned to Gaia, the ancient earth, who had once helped Kronos overthrow Uranus. Gaia, wise and eternal, understood the pain of betrayal. She whispered a plan to Rhea, a secret birth, a hidden child, a deception that could change the fate of the cosmos. Rhea listened, and when the time came, she acted. In the quiet shadows of Mount Lyctos on the island of Crete, Rhea gave birth to her sixth child, a boy named Zeus. He was strong, radiant, and full of promise. She wrapped him in swaddling cloth and cradled him with trembling hands. But she could not keep him, not yet. Kronos was watching. To protect her son, Rhea took a stone, wrapped it in cloth, and presented it to Kronos as if it were the newborn. Without question, Kronos swallowed the bundle, believing he had once again defeated fate. He did not notice the absence of a cry, the silence of the stone. He was too consumed by fear. Meanwhile, Zeus was hidden in a cave on Crete, far from his father's reach. There he was raised in secret by nymphs and fed by the divine goat Amalthea, whose milk nourished him with strength and wisdom. The cave echoed with lullabies and the soft clatter of shields used to mask his cries from Kronos' ears. As he grew, Zeus learned of his siblings, of his father's tyranny, and of the prophecy that still lingered in the air. Rhea's act of defiance had changed everything. The cycle had been broken, if only slightly. A child had escaped, a spark had been lit, and in the hidden cave of Crete, the future king of the gods was learning to stand. Far from the throne of Kronos and the shadow of his fear, a cave nestled in the mountains of Crete held a secret. It was no ordinary cave. Its walls were ancient and warm, its air thick with the scent of moss and milk. This was the hiding place of Zeus, the child Rhea had saved from his father's hunger. Here, in the quiet cradle of the earth, the future king of the gods grew in secret. Rhea had entrusted Zeus to the care of nymphs, gentle spirits of nature, who sang lullabies and danced like wind through leaves. They fed him with the milk of Amalthea, a divine goat whose horns dripped with abundance. Her milk was rich with strength, and her presence was fierce and protective. Zeus suckled and slept, unaware of the danger that loomed beyond the cave's mouth. To keep Kronos from hearing his cries, the Keretes' armored warriors of myth clashed their swords and shields in rhythmic noise, masking the sounds of infancy with the music of battle. Their dance was wild, their devotion unwavering. Every clang of metal was a lullaby of defiance, a promise that this child would not be swallowed. As Zeus grew, so did his curiosity. The cave was his world, but he sensed there was more beyond the stone. The nymphs told him stories of his siblings trapped in Kronos' belly, of the titans who ruled the world, of the prophecy that whispered his name. Zeus listened, wide-eyed and silent, absorbing the truth like sunlight through leaves. He learned to climb, to leap, to speak with the wind. He was clever, strong, and bold. The cave had kept him safe, but it had also shaped him. It was a place of shelter, yes, but also a forge. Within its shadows, Zeus became more than a child. He became a spark, a storm waiting to rise. And beyond the cave, Kronos sat on his throne, unaware that the very fate he had tried to devour was growing stronger with each passing day. Zeus had grown strong in secret. Raised in the hidden cave of Crete, he had learned the stories of his siblings, swallowed at birth by their father, Kronos, and trapped within his belly like stars, swallowed by night. The thought haunted Zeus. He had never met his brothers or sisters, yet he felt their presence, distant and muffled, as if their voices echoed through the very bones of the world. When the time came, Zeus left the safety of the cave. He descended from the mountains, no longer a hidden child, but a young god with purpose in his stride. He sought out Metis, the titaness of wisdom, whose mind was as sharp as any blade. She knew of Gaia's prophecy and saw in Zeus the glimmer of its fulfillment. Together, they devised a plan, not of war, not yet, but of cunning. Zeus returned to Kronos in disguise, presenting himself as a humble cupbearer. Kronos, proud and unsuspecting, welcomed the stranger. He had no reason to fear a servant. Day after day, Zeus poured his father's wine, bowing low, speaking little. He watched, he waited, and then, one evening, he offered Kronos a special drink, a mixture of honey, herbs, and a secret potion crafted by Metis herself. Kronos drank deeply, unaware of the trap. At first, nothing happened. Then, a rumble stirred in his belly. A great unease rose within him, and before he could call for help, he doubled over with a groan that shook the halls of his palace. Kronos vomited. Out came Hestia, blinking in the light. Then Demeter, gasping for air. Hera, regal, even in confusion. Hades, grim and silent. Poseidon, wild-eyed and fierce. One by one, the swallowed gods returned to the world, fully grown and filled with the power they had been denied. They stood beside Zeus, dazed but grateful, their bond forged not by childhood but by shared captivity. Kronos, weakened and stunned, realized too late what had happened. The prophecy he had tried to bury had risen before him, not as a whisper, but as a storm. The children of Kronos were free, and they were not content to forgive. The children of Kronos had returned, not as infants, but as gods, fully grown and brimming with power. Freed from their father's belly by Zeus and the cunning of Metis, they stood together for the first time. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon each carried the weight of captivity and the fire of vengeance. And at their center stood Zeus, the youngest, the boldest, the one who had dared to challenge the king of the Titans. Kronos, once confident in his rule, now faced a storm he could not swallow. The prophecy he had feared had come to life. His children, united and defiant, refused to bow. The world, still young, trembled with the tension of what was to come. The age of peace was over. The age of war had begun. This was the Titanomachy, the great war between the old gods and the new. On one side stood the Titans, led by Kronos, and supported by his loyal siblings. On the other stood the Olympians, the children of Kronos, led by Zeus, and driven by the promise of a new order. The battle was not swift. It was not clean. It stretched across the heavens and the earth, shaking mountains, splitting seas, and darkening skies. The Titans fought with ancient strength, wielding the raw power of creation. They hurled mountains, summoned storms, and roared with the fury of forgotten ages. The Olympians, though younger, fought with precision and unity. Zeus wielded lightning, Poseidon summoned waves, and Hades commanded shadows. Each clash echoed through time, each strike carved into the bones of the world. But the war was not yet decided. The forces were evenly matched, and the battle lines shifted like tides. For 10 long years, the Titanomachy raged, neither side yielding, neither side victorious. The world held its breath, caught between past and future, between the rule of the Titans and the rise of the gods. And in the heart of the storm, Zeus knew they needed more than strength. They needed allies. The war was far from over, but the tide was about to turn. The war had begun, and the world trembled beneath its weight. The Titanomachy raged across the heavens and the earth, a clash of ancient power and rising ambition. On one side stood Kronos and the Titans, proud and unyielding. On the other, the Olympians, young gods born of rebellion, led by Zeus, the child who had escaped, grown, and returned to challenge the old order. Zeus knew that strength alone would not win this war. The Titans were mighty, forged in the earliest fires of creation. To defeat them, the Olympians needed unity, strategy, and allies. Zeus turned to his brothers, Poseidon, lord of the sea, fierce and unpredictable, and Hades, ruler of the shadows, quiet but relentless. Together, the three formed a triad of power, each commanding a domain that would one day shape the cosmos. But even their combined might was not enough. The Titans held the high ground, and the war dragged on, year after year. So Zeus sought help from those who had been cast aside, the 100-handed ones and the Cyclopes, buried long ago by Kronos, imprisoned in the depths of Tartarus. With Gaia's guidance, Zeus descended into the underworld and freed them. The 100-handed ones, massive and wild, joined the Olympians with thunderous loyalty. Their 100 arms hurled boulders like pebbles. Their 50 heads roared with fury. The Cyclopes, grateful and eager, forged weapons for the gods, for Zeus, the thunderbolt, for Poseidon, the trident, and for Hades, the helm of darkness. These gifts turned the tide of battle, giving the Olympians tools, not just of war, but of destiny. The Olympians, once scattered and uncertain, now stood united. They were no longer just children of Kronos. They were leaders, warriors, and symbols of a new age. Their alliance was forged in fire and shadow, in loyalty and vengeance. And with each passing day, their strength grew. The Titans, once invincible, began to falter. The old world trembled, the new world stirred, and in the heart of the storm, Zeus prepared for the final strike. As the Titanomachy dragged into its 10th year, the war between the Titans and the Olympians grew heavier, louder, and more desperate. Mountains had been hurled, oceans churned, and the sky itself bore scars from the endless conflict. Both sides were powerful, but neither could claim victory. The balance of power teetered, and the world waited for a shift. That shift came from the depths of Tartarus. Long ago, Kronos had imprisoned his most fearsome siblings, the 100-handed ones, known as the Titanomachy. They were monstrous in size, each with 50 heads and 100 arms, born of Gaia and Uranus. Their strength was unmatched, their fury untamed. But Kronos, fearing their power, had buried them deep in the underworld, locking them away in eternal darkness. Zeus, guided by Gaia's wisdom and driven by the need for allies, descended into Tartarus. There, in the gloom, he found the Hecatoncers, Briareus, Cottus, and Gyges, bound and silent. He freed them, offering not just liberty, but purpose. The giants, long forgotten and burning with rage, accepted. When they emerged, the tide of war shifted. The 100-handed ones did not fight like gods or titans. They fought like storms. Their 100 arms hurled boulders faster than thought. Their 50 heads roared commands that shook the sky. They stood beside the Olympians, not as servants, but as forces of nature. Their arrival shattered the stalemate, breaking the rhythm of Titan dominance. The Titans, once confident, now faltered. They had never faced such fury, such relentless power. The Hecatoncers were not just warriors. They were vengeance incarnate, the buried rage of a world mistreated and denied. With each strike, the Olympians grew bolder. With each roar, the Titans grew weaker. The war was no longer balanced. The final battle loomed, and the old order trembled. As the Titanomachy raged on, the Olympians grew stronger, but victory remained just out of reach. The Titans, ancient and stubborn, refused to fall. Zeus knew that brute force alone would not win the war. They needed something more, something that could break the sky itself. He turned to the Cyclopes. Long ago, Kronos had imprisoned these one-eyed giants, fearing their wild power and unmatched skill. They were not warriors, like the 100-handed ones, but craftsmen, builders of wonders, forgers of divine weapons. Zeus freed them from Tartarus, offering not just freedom, but purpose. The Cyclopes, grateful and eager, agreed to help. In the heart of the forge, beneath mountains that glowed with molten fire, the Cyclopes began their work. They shaped thunder from raw energy, molded lightning into bolts that could split the heavens. For Zeus, they crafted the thunderbolt, a weapon of pure storm, sharp as judgment and fast as thought. It crackled with power, a gift of sky and fire. For Poseidon, they forged the trident, a 3-pronged spear that could stir the oceans, summon waves, and shatter stone. It pulsed with the rhythm of the deep, a symbol of command over all waters. For Hades, they created the helm of darkness, a shadowy crown that granted invisibility and silence. With it, Hades could move unseen, strike without warning, and vanish like mist. These were not mere tools. They were symbols of rule, forged from rebellion and sealed with destiny. With them, the Olympians became more than challengers. They became gods, armed with thunder, sea, and shadow. The brothers stood ready. The final battle loomed, and the sky itself seemed to hold its breath. The Cyclopes had done more than forge weapons. They had forged the future. The sky had darkened, the earth trembled. The war between the Titans and the Olympians had begun, and it would not end quickly. For 10 long years, the world was caught in the grip of the Titanomachy, a battle so vast and violent that even time seemed to hold its breath. On one side stood the Titans, led by Kronos, the old king, who still clung to power with iron will. His brothers and loyal followers fought beside him, strong, ancient beings who had ruled since the dawn of creation. They hurled mountains, summoned storms, and fought with the fury of a world that feared change. On the other side stood the Olympians, Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, and their freed siblings. They were younger, but not weaker. With the thunderbolt, the trident, and the helm of darkness, they struck with precision and purpose. They had allies now, the hundred-handed ones, who rained down stone and fury, and the Cyclopes, who forged weapons of divine power. The war was not constant. It came in waves, great battles followed by uneasy silence. The sky would light up with fire, then fall into darkness. The earth would split, then settle. Oceans surged, forests burned, and stars blinked out, only to return. The world itself became a battlefield, reshaped by every clash. Zeus led with vision and courage, but even he grew weary. The Titans were relentless. Kronos, though aging, fought with the desperation of a ruler who knew his time was ending. He would not surrender. He could not. To lose was to vanish into shadow, to become a name whispered in fear and forgotten in time. But the Olympians had something the Titans lacked: unity. They fought not just for power, but for a new world. They believed in a future beyond fear, beyond the endless cycles of betrayal and revenge. And that belief gave them strength. As the 10th year dawned, the war reached its peak. The final battle loomed, greater than any before. The sky cracked with thunder. The earth opened its jaws. The gods stood ready, and the Titans braced for the storm. The end was near, and with it, the fate of the cosmos would be decided. The sky had darkened with storm clouds. The earth trembled beneath the weight of war. For 10 long years, the Titanomachy had raged a battle between the old gods and the new, between Kronos and his children, between the past and the future. Now, the final moment had come. The war would end, not with armies, but with a clash between father and son. Kronos stood tall, his eyes burning with ancient fury. He had ruled the cosmos for ages, shaped the world with his will, and swallowed his own children to preserve his throne. But now, those children stood before him, free and defiant, and at their center was Zeus, the sun he had failed to consume, the spark of rebellion, the storm made flesh. Zeus did not speak. He raised his arm, and the sky answered. Thunder rolled across the heavens, and lightning danced in his grip. The Cyclopes had forged his weapon well, a thunderbolt that pulsed with raw power, sharp as fate itself. Kronos lifted his sickle, the same blade that had once cut down Uranus. It gleamed with old blood and old pride. The battle began with a roar. Kronos struck first, swinging the sickle in wide arcs, slicing through air and stone. Zeus dodged, leaped, and countered with bolts of lightning that split the sky. The ground cracked beneath them, mountains crumbled, and oceans surged. Time itself seemed to slow, watching the clash of generations. Kronos fought with desperation. He was strong, but his strength was rooted in fear. Fear of change, fear of prophecy, fear of his own children. Zeus fought with purpose. He was not just battling for power, but for a new world, one free of tyranny and silence. The thunderbolt struck true. With a final cry, Zeus hurled his weapon, and it pierced the sky, striking Kronos with blinding force. The old king fell, his sickle clattering to the ground. The Titans gasped. The Olympians stood still. and the world exhaled. Kronos was defeated, but Zeus did not destroy him. Instead, he cast Kronos and the defeated Titans into Tartarus, the deepest pit of the underworld, guarded by the 100-handed ones. The war was over. The age of the Titans had ended, and a new age, the age of the Olympians, had begun. Zeus stood atop the world, crowned not by gold, but by thunder. He had fulfilled the prophecy. He had broken the cycle. And the sky, for the first time in ages, was free. The final battle had been fought. The sky still echoed with the thunder of Zeus's victory, and the earth bore the scars of a war that had shaken the very bones of the world. Kronos, the once mighty king of the cosmos, had fallen. His sickle lay shattered, his pride broken. The Titans, who had ruled since the dawn of time, stood defeated, not by age, but by the rise of a new order. Zeus did not celebrate with cruelty. He did not destroy his father or the Titans who had followed him. Instead, he chose justice, swift, firm, and eternal. With the help of his brothers, Poseidon and Hades, and the mighty 100-handed ones, Zeus bound the Titans in unbreakable chains forged by the Cyclopes. These were no ordinary bonds. They were laced with the will of the cosmos, heavy with the weight of fate. One by one, the defeated Titans were cast into Tartarus, the deepest, darkest pit beneath the earth. It was a place older than the sky, a prison of shadows and silence. The 100-handed ones stood guard at its gates, their many arms ready to strike down any who dared escape. The Titans, once proud rulers of the universe, now sat in gloom, their voices swallowed by the abyss. Not all Titans were punished. Some, like Oceanus and Themis, had remained neutral or wise during the war. They were spared, allowed to walk the earth in peace. But for Kronos and his loyal followers, Tartarus became their new throne, a kingdom of chains and regret. The war was over. The world, battered and broken, began to heal. The sky cleared, the seas calmed, the earth exhaled, and above it all, the Olympians stood victorious, not just as warriors, but as the new guardians of the cosmos. The war was over. The Titans had fallen, bound in chains, and cast into Tartarus. The Olympians stood victorious, their thunder echoing across a world reborn. But victory was not the end. It was the beginning. The cosmos, once ruled by Kronos alone, now needed balance. It needed order. It needed rulers. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, the three brothers who had led the charge, gathered to decide the fate of the world. They did not argue or fight. They knew that power, if hoarded, would rot. So they chose to divide the realms, each taking a part of creation to rule, not as tyrants, but as guardians. Zeus claimed the sky. He took the heavens, the clouds, the thunder, and the stars. From his throne atop Mount Olympus, he would watch over gods and mortals alike. His voice would be the storm, his gaze the sun, his justice swift as lightning. The sky was vast, ever-changing, and full of promise, just like Zeus himself. Poseidon claimed the sea. He embraced the oceans, the rivers, and the deep unknown. With his trident, he stirred waves and summoned storms. He ruled the creatures of the deep and the tides that touched every shore. The sea was wild, mysterious, and powerful, a perfect match for Poseidon's fierce spirit. Hades claimed the underworld. He descended into the realm of shadows, where souls journeyed after death. He did not rule with cruelty, but with quiet strength. He became the keeper of balance, the guardian of the dead, and the silent judge of fate. The underworld was dark, but not evil. It was necessary, and Hades ruled it with dignity. The earth itself remained shared, a place where gods and mortals could walk, where life could bloom, and where destiny could unfold. The three brothers, though divided by realm, remained united in purpose. They had ended the age of Titans and begun the age of gods. And so the world was shaped, sky above, sea below, and shadow beneath. The cosmos breathed in harmony, and the Olympians took their place as the new rulers of existence. The war was over. The Titans had fallen, bound in chains, and cast into Tartarus. The world, once torn by thunder and shadow, began to heal, and from the ashes of battle a new home rose, not from stone or fire, but from divine purpose. It was Mount Olympus, the sacred peak where the new gods would dwell. High above the earth, Olympus stood untouched by storm or sorrow. Its summit pierced the sky, crowned with clouds that shimmered like silk. It was not built, it was chosen, a place where the gods could gather, rule, and dream. Zeus claimed it as his throne, not out of pride, but out of promise. He had led the rebellion, freed his siblings, and shaped the future. Olympus would be their sanctuary. One by one, the gods ascended. Hera, regal and wise, became queen of Olympus, guardian of marriage and family. Poseidon, though lord of the sea, visited often, his trident echoing through the halls. Hades remained in the underworld, but his presence was felt, a silent reminder of balance. Demeter brought the harvest, Hestia tended the hearth, and the world began to bloom under their care. Olympus was more than a palace. It was a symbol of unity, of renewal, of divine order. The gods did not rule with fear, as Kronos had. They ruled with vision. They watched over mortals, guided fate, and shaped the seasons. They quarreled, yes, for even gods have tempers, but they also celebrated, feasted, and told stories that echoed through eternity. The birth of Olympus marked the beginning of a new age, the age of the Olympians, the age of thunder and wisdom, of sea and shadow, of fire and memory. The cosmos had found its rhythm, and the gods had found their home. And high above the world, Mount Olympus stood eternal, radiant and alive with the voices of immortals. The war had ended, but its echoes still rumbled beneath the earth. The Olympians had risen, the world had been divided, and Mount Olympus stood tall in the sky. Yet far below, in the deepest pit of existence, the defeated Titans faced a fate darker than death, the eternal prison of Tartarus. Tartarus was not merely a place, it was a realm of shadow and silence, older than the gods, deeper than the underworld. It lay beneath even Hades' domain, unreachable by mortals, untouched by light. Here, Kronos and his loyal Titans were cast, bound in chains, forged by the Cyclopes, and guarded by the 100-handed ones, whose fury had once turned the tide of war. The prison was vast, but it offered no escape. Its walls were made of despair, its gates sealed with the will of Zeus. Time did not flow in Tartarus. It stood still, heavy and endless. The Titans, once rulers of the cosmos, now sat in silence, their power drained, their voices swallowed by the abyss. Kronos, the former king, did not speak. He stared into the void, haunted by the prophecy he had tried to outrun. Around him, the others, Iapetus, Crius, Cous, Hyperion waited, not for rescue, but for memory. They were not forgotten, but they were no longer feared. Their names would echo in myths, but their reign had ended. Not all Titans were imprisoned. Some, like Themis and Mnemosyne, had chosen wisdom over war and were spared. But for those who had fought against the Olympians, Tartarus became their eternal throne, a place where pride was buried and silence reigned. The Olympians did not visit. They ruled the sky, the sea, and the underworld, shaping the world above. But they never forgot what lay beneath. Tartarus remained a reminder that even gods must answer to fate, and that power, once misused, must be contained. And so the Titans slept in chains, deep in the earth, beneath the stories of gods and mortals. Their prison was eternal, their legacy a warning. The world had been forged in fire, thunder, and shadow. From the chaos of creation came Gaia and Uranus. From their union came the Titans. From rebellion came Kronos. And from prophecy came Zeus, the child who escaped, the sun who returned, the storm that changed everything. The Titanomachy had raged for 10 long years. Mountains had been hurled, oceans stirred, and the sky split open with lightning. The old gods fought to preserve their rule, and the new gods fought to shape a future. In the end, the Olympians stood victorious. Kronos had fallen. The Titans had been cast into Tartarus, bound in chains and silence. The age of the Titans was over. But the world did not crumble. It did not fall into ruin. It began to breathe again. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, the 3 brothers who had led the rebellion, gathered to divide the cosmos. Zeus claimed the sky, where clouds drifted like dreams and stars blinked like watchful eyes. Poseidon took the sea, vast and mysterious, where waves whispered secrets and creatures danced in the deep. Hades descended into the underworld, where shadows held stories and souls found rest. The earth itself remained shared, a place of life, of growth, of mortals yet to come. And high above it all, Mount Olympus rose. It was not carved by hand or shaped by tools. It was chosen by fate, crowned by clouds, and lit by the fire of divine purpose. Here the gods would dwell, not as tyrants, but as guardians, not as rulers of fear, but as keepers of balance. Zeus built his throne, not from gold, but from thunder. Hera stood beside him, regal and wise. Demeter brought the harvest. Hestia tended the hearth, and the world began to bloom. The Olympians were not perfect. They quarreled, they loved, they made mistakes, but they were present, they were alive, and they were part of the world they had fought to protect. The stories of the Titans faded into myth. Their names became whispers in caves and echoes in the wind. But Olympus stood tall, a beacon of the new age, a home for gods, a symbol of hope. And so the cosmos found its rhythm. The sky blinked with stars, the sea sang to the shore. The underworld held its silence, and Olympus pulsed with laughter, music, and the quiet hum of eternity. The age of Titans had ended. The age of Olympus had begun. And somewhere beneath the stars, a child listened to the story, eyes heavy, heart full, drifting between myth and dream. Sleep now, little one. The gods are watching. The world is safe. The thunder sleeps.